I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Mazda MX-5 GT RS. The GT RS is an Australia-specific higher performance iteration of the ND Mazda MX-5 that's now been on the market for quite a few years, although in my view it's actually aging quite gracefully, at least outside. We'll see the opinion is slightly different when we get into the car. But basically, while Mazda have run a bunch of limited edition top-spec MX-5s over the last few years, the GT RS is intended to be a running version to sit at the top of the range, and it gets a bunch of tasty extra features that you don't score on the regular 2-litre GT version of this classic open-top roadster. And you can start to see a few of them immediately on this machine grey example. And those differences start here down the side, as the GT RS wears unique to the MX-5 17-inch forged black BBS alloy wheels, shod in Bridgestone Potenza S001 tyres all round, measuring 205 width at all four corners, and that compares to 195 in the 1.5. But no matter which MX-5 you go for, they always wear pretty skinny tyres. Now, sitting behind that wheel, you can see popping out there are the red Brembo brake calipers and big brakes, at least per MX-5 standards. The rotors are 280mm here at the front wheels for the GT RS. Hardly enormous brakes in the scheme of the car industry now, with some of the vehicles we've reviewed this year having over 400mm discs. But still, for this sort of car weighing around 1,000 kilos, you don't need massive stoppers in order to make it haul up. There's one more change that I'll point out under the bonnet too. Mazda say the MX-5 GT RS is the track-ready version of the MX-5. Manual bonnet strut, no surprise there. And we can see one other thing that gets fitted from factory, and that's this strut brace running across the top of the 2-litre engine here. You can't get the RS in the 1.5, the purest special of the MX-5. Instead, the 2-litre is a mandatory take, 135 kilowatts of power, 205 Newton meters of torque, and we'll see how this goes when we get out onto the road. Much like the exterior of the MX-5, Mazda really haven't overstyled the cabin of their Roadster, but nor have they given it all that many substantial updates over the years. In fact, the ND today appears much the same as it did when it first launched here in Australia. And in some ways that's good, because the interior is clean, good looking, and quite well made. But in other ways, it hasn't kept up with most of Mazda's other vehicles, and even competitors like the upcoming Toyota GR86 and Subaru BRZ now look quite a bit more modern inside than this car. So we've got a set of gorgeous analog dials up here. One of them is actually digitized, but the resolution is so high it looks analog. We've got a big tack in the center and then a speedo off to the right. No digital speedo in this car, but thankfully reading your speed is easy-ish. That's one thing I think that could be added in future, and that would help. It certainly looks clean though. We've got a lovely steering wheel, no silly flat bottom or anything like that. Feels good in the hand, contrast stitched and metal accents, really lovely wheel. I think that looks and feels good. And then down between the seats, we've got this lovely short throw, like bolt action shifter for the 6-speed manual gearbox. You can get automatic MX-5s across the range. I've actually never driven one, and I don't like to wear ignorance as some kind of badge of honor, but I think that goes to show that really an MX-5 is about a manual gearbox if you can drive it. And even if you can't drive it, this would be a great car to learn manual on, because this engine has enough torque just off idle that you're really not going to struggle to pick it up quickly in this car, and I recommend doing so. And the majority of MX-5 sales still are manual, probably the only car in Australia that holds true for. Now, here in the RS, we are sitting on upgraded seats, which almost have kind of Audi TT-esque baseball stitching running down the middle. They're cool. Unfortunately, they're not especially supportive. And in fact, the Recaro seats that have featured on a bunch of limited edition MX-5s are noticeably better. And I wish that they had made the choice to put those Recaros into this new top shelf MX-5. That would have made sense. Still, the seats fully manual, no height adjustment, just fore and aft and backrest, no lumbar. Again, so they're not the most comfortable for super long road trips, but for quick blats, they're entirely sufficient. Moving further afield, we've got a 7-inch touchscreen here in the center. It's Mazda's old system now. You do control it through this rotary dial, or you can reach out and touch it when you're stopped. It's just sufficient. All the graphics look really dated. but it's still pretty easy to pair your phone. You got Bluetooth audio and a pretty good Bose stereo in this car with speakers in the headrest as well, which is pretty cool. Heated seats as well. So this car's really well outfitted, even for winter blasts here in Australia. We've got climate control, but it's really, really simple. Just these 3 knurled dials here, aviation style vents, and the body color carries through to the top of the door skin. So while it is hard, it's shiny and cool and matches the machine gray of the exterior of this car. So, you know, all in all, it's a pretty simple outfit, but that's exactly how you would want it in a Mazda MX-5. The big question will be whether this car gets any kind of refit with Mazda's newer wide screen, or if there's going to be an NE MX-5 at all, because unfortunately when you look at the sales charts for the MX-5 between the NA, NB, NC and ND, sales are, you know, falling over the decades as this car becomes more niche. And I think that's a really sad thing to imagine, because as we're about to find out, it's a really fun car to drive. Here around the back of the MX-5, you know, it's just a lovely looking little roadster. Machine grey works well on it, but this car doesn't really have a bad colour. Absolute train spotters will notice the new Mazda font here on the back for both the MX-5 and the Skyactiv G badge. We've got a little remote release button for the tiny boot, 130 litres on the soft top, 127 on the retractable fastback. The thing is, if you don't mind using soft bags for going away, you can get quite a few of them in here. If you use hard cases like this, you're going to get 1 or 2 maximum. So it's not really meant to be super practical. It's meant for 2 people and a small amount of luggage. So what's it going to cost you to run a Mazda MX-5 GT RS or not? These are some cheap vehicles to maintain, even if you intend on tracking it. And that's because being so light, they really are light on consumables as well. Now, I can't tell you how many tires or how many brakes you'll need if you are planning to drive this vehicle in a hardcore way with regularity. But if you just intend to use it as a backroad blaster, servicing for starters is relatively easy to keep under control. The Mazda cap price servicing program will see you spending $1,755 across the first 5 years and 50,000 Ks. 10,000 kilometre intervals are a little bit less convenient, but pretty much par for the course for this segment. The car has a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty like all Mazdas, and while your fuel consumption will vary, in our testing we managed 8 litres per 100 Ks combined, because, well, that engine really does encourage you to give it a rev. So what is the MX-5 GT RS like to drive? How's it different to the standard GT? And, you know, what is this classic sports car truly like from behind the wheel? All right, let's have a chat and talk about it. So the first thing you notice is just how tiny it is. I mean, you can see it from the outside, you can see it on the road, but the ND is a really small car. It's smaller than the generation that it replaced in the NC, and it's lighter, and it is just tiny. And in a world of cars that get bigger and bigger and bigger, the first sensation you get when you drive any MX-5 ND is just how compact this car is. And really, that Mazda should be congratulated for making that the case. But that's true of any ND, not just this new flavour. The second thing you notice is just the ease of the control surfaces, and how even if you're not the world's most confident manual driver, from the second you pull away from the curb, you can just tell that the clutch is, you know, perfectly weighted, the friction point's easy to find, and because this super high compression Skyactiv G engine makes really good torque off idle, even though it's naturally aspirated, it's very, very easy to just pick it up quickly and start driving it, either comfortably or sportily. There's really no learning curve to a Mazda MX-5. About the only control surface that isn't perfectly in sync is that it does have relatively long steering, actually. And so if you're coming from something like an 86 with its super quick, lightning quick steering rack, that is one facet you have to get used to. Long steering aside though, it's just a joy to drive, even just to run errands in, not even at high speed, just to blat about town. But then when you're not in lockdown, for instance, and you get out onto some sporty roads, this car does remind you of, you know, its sheer brilliance. So as I mentioned, you can't take the RS trim in 1.5, which in some ways is a bit of a disappointment, because I personally love the 1.5. It's very much the minority engine among sales for the ND. It only makes 97 kilowatts of power. It's absolutely no powerhouse, but it's the most true to the original NA. And because it, you know, it does want for some power and some torque, you really do get to just absolutely wring the neck of the 1.5 pretty much constantly, which is great fun. It's what this car's all about. Now, when the car came out, when the ND came out, the 2 litres big problem was that it felt pretty flat and characterless compared to the 1.5, and it didn't rev anywhere near as high. That was addressed for the ND2. There are also some changes made to the gearbox internals, and as such, it's not really a problem. The 2 litre feels energetic. It still doesn't have the absurd levels of zing as the 1.5, but it's not far off really. 135 kilowatts of power and 205 newton meters of torque makes this 1-ton vehicle eminently drivable. It's fairly quick off the line. It's got a fairly strong mid-range. Where it starts to run out of puff is actually that top end, and that's still where the 1.5 just loves to have a real sing. So hopefully you caught that. One of the beautiful things about any MX-5 is how, because it's so light and the wheelbase is so short, really anywhere that you just want to cinch in your line around a corner, you can just feed in some throttle, and it doesn't even have to get super leery. I've got all the nannies on at the moment, but you just get that little bit of push oversteer, just tightens your line and reminds you that you are sitting over the driven wheels effectively. It feels really, really good. And I think it's a testament to the fact that you don't have to spend 6 figures on a sports car to have a lot of fun. And in fact, the MX-5 would be way more fun at 50 grand than many cars 4 times the price. As for exhaust, it's not the loudest, but it does sound good. And of course you are able to change things like that aftermarket, although I think there was probably space for something slightly fruitier for the RS. Gear shift is bang on perfect in my mind. I know that's not necessarily everybody's view, but I think that the clutch is absolutely perfectly set up, and then this really short rifle bolt throw, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And it just slots into gear so nicely. It's such a positive action. You really know you've got it home. There's absolutely no kind of vagueness between ratios. It's just so sorted. And then because of how quickly this Skyactiv G engine revs, this is probably the easiest car in the world to heel and tow. Both the pedal placement and just the speed and alacrity of the motor make it just an absolute pleasure to pedal down the road. The other big change that I forgot to mention up front about the GT RS is the move to Bilstein dampers, and they've been used on a range of limited edition NDs, and they really do transform the ride. Not only do they make the car actually more compliant day to day, but they almost eliminate the ND's normally quite prolific body roll. So it makes this car, you know, a much sharper handler, both on track but also on road, where it just pitches and rolls far less. And that was kind of one of the main complaints about the ND when it came out, was the near comical level of roll, and you just don't get that in the versions that are suspended with the Bilsteins, and this is one of them. So if that's kind of your bag, then I think you'll like the ride of this car. It still does have a little bit of that roll engineered into it. It helps out the tires, which are admittedly really, really modest and skinny, even with this track package. And on the 1.5, they're even skinnier 195s, but here we've got the 205s all round. The Brembo front brakes have got a really good positive feel under the pedal. They're pretty fade resistant. Obviously we're not carrying around a huge amount of weight here in the MX-5. And I think it's really just how it all comes together, you know. Pleasant steering, even if the ratio is a little long or a little slow for my tastes. A quick and zingy engine, positive throw, positive brakes. It's all just a real pleasure. Now, where this chassis is starting to show its age is in the adaptive safety arena. We do have a few aids. We've got blind spot monitoring, we've got a lane holding assistant, we've got forward collision warning. We don't have modern stuff like adaptive cruise control. We don't have high-speed AEB, for instance. We don't have reversing AEB. But the ND is starting to date in that sense, in the technological sense, same as what we see in the cabin. While the dynamics are simply classic and do not age, it will be interesting to see whether or not this car gets an overhaul to bring up some of those older attributes in the next few years, or if this could be it for the ND's story. So that's a look at the new Mazda MX-5 GT RS. The thing about the MX-5 is that it just never goes out of style, and it really doesn't matter which variant of this car you buy, all the way from the absolute bottom of the range MX-5 1.5 right through to the most expensive RF hardtop version. These cars have absolute charm. If the combination that you like is the 2-litre soft-top GT RS, as this car appears in today, then all power to you. It certainly is the easiest of the MX-5s to track. It has a couple of nice little upgrades for $3,000 over the standard GT that I think make economic sense if that's what you're into. As for me though, I'd go for the 1.5 because I want less power. I want to have to wring this car's neck all the time, which you can do with that smaller engine. But horses for courses. Keen to know your opinion. Let me know down below the video. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.